on April 5th, 2022, and we are all here this evening. And Mr. Wiley, would you do just a quick roll call?
Commissioner Doug Neely.
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Sean Cross is absent. Commissioner Rachel Lau Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Here.
And Chair Denise McGriff.
Here. All right, we have, I see no citizens. I thought I'd look down, look over the thing, see whether there aren't any this evening. I did have a phone call about 5 minutes ago from a citizen, but it was not urban renewal related, and I will speak to the city manager about what the possible answer to this question is after our meeting is commenced. We have 2 items for discussion on the agenda tonight, and I hope everybody had an opportunity to review the packet. And thank you again, Mr. Wiley, for that packet. We are going to be talking about the process of updating our urban renewal plan, doing a little bit of a minor sort of review of where we've come from and where we are going right now. So I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Conkle and Mr. Graham.
Thank you. Evening. So tonight we're going to continue the process of discussion and updating the city's urban renewal plan. So this is more of a retreat type setting to work through creating that plan, the vision, the process, and then tonight we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about some of the financials and the steps ahead. So at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Graham to begin his presentation and discussion.
Thank you, Mr.
Before you start, Mr. Graham, just a minute, let me acknowledge the other people that are here. So we have, besides Jacob, while they are recorded, we have Ann Griffin from the Economic Development Department. We have our financial wizard, Mr. Matt Zook, and our attorney, Bill Kabeisman, in addition to Mr. Graham and Mr. Conkle.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, commissioners, and welcome to your retreat. This is the last time we met was on November the 16th, 2021, a little while ago. And at that time, we focused on specific steps and elements of the decision-making process. So tonight, we finish up with that process by looking at a flow chart, which will really put a bow on the entire process in terms of decision-making. You probably see that on your screen, but this is really a 30 or 40,000 foot overview. It is not meant to look at every detail in the decision-making process, but only some major components of that process. So after we finish looking at that, we will have an update of the financial component of the plan, an update of that, and possibly go on to maybe discussing some projects, identifying and discussing certain projects. So let's look at the framework here. So an application is submitted by the applicant, or an RFP is distributed by you. And a project comes in, and there's a preliminary review of the application by a partial due diligence team. Now, we have both a full due diligence team and a partial due diligence team, and at this stage, it would only be some of the members of that team, which would include the financial review firm, the economic development manager, city finance director, and we also added the community development director by a suggestion of the city manager. Thought it was a very good idea, and I did too, because of the entitlement process and the knowledge that the director would have with regard to zoning and all the aspects associated with planning. Whether we, as a preliminary review team, like the project or not, it still goes forward. You get to see it one way or the other, and with a recommendation from the due diligence team. And if you do not like the deal, there is no deal, and it's over. If you like it, it proceeds further to the pre-application conference held by the planning department. And as you know, there will be notes that come out of that process. And at the same time, the due diligence team and staff will learn more about the project as they go through that application, a pre-application conference. And a preliminary development agreement would most likely be developed as we learn more about the project.
Can I ask a quick question here? So I want to have you back up a little bit. So I really don't want the Urban Renewal Commission, this is just my opinion, to base a project on whether they like it or not. I really think that we should not be using that term. I think that if we're going to have a project, we want to make sure that it checks certain boxes, which I think is what you mean,
Right.
but you use the word like.
Yeah.
So I don't want the public to think that it's like a beauty contest. I don't want it to be a beauty contest. I would not suggest we have it be a beauty contest, but it be based on some of our goals and pretending on particularly where the project is proposed may have a little bit different tweak, depending if it's 12th and Main or if it's, 10th and Main. It's going to be a little bit different because we might have different standards that we want to address and say, well, we think it needs to meet these goals, or if it's 12th and Main, it needs to meet these goals. So that would be something I think that I would like to suggest that we consider. Again, I don't want people to be coming in, or development people coming in and saying, well, it's a beauty contest and I just have to dazzle them with all the great pictures and, say the right words. And then it's like, Shazam, we're done. But it's not going to be that.
No, it's not going to be that. I use a colloquial term, like, because it's usually used colloquially or freely in discussing investment processes. But that's not what I meant. It's not a beauty contest.
Yeah, that's why I was asking to clarify.
Yeah, it's one based on your vision. If it fits your vision and other components of your and other goals that you've also identified, then it goes forward. And then again, it may not fit that vision or those goals, but it still goes forward. You get to see it no matter what. And so we'll provide a recommendation one way or the other. And if you I said it again, if you prefer the deal based on your vision, it goes on to a pre-application conference, and notes are derived from that conference that help everyone understand what's needed from a planning point of view, and what's required from a planning point of view, entitlement point of view. At the same time, or near the same time, a preliminary development agreement is being developed as we learn more about the project as it goes through the planning process. And then the in-depth, there's more, after that, there's an in-depth review application, in-depth review of the application by the full due diligence team, which would include bond counsel, the financial review firm, city attorney or a redevelopment attorney, economic development manager, city finance director, community development director, and city manager recommended the public works director, yes.
Why the Public Works Director?
Infrastructure, sidewalks, street improvements.
Well, wouldn't that be
offsites.
covered under a pre-application?
Yeah, but if we're in this process, they wouldn't be doing a pre-op until there's at least a preliminary agreement about a DDA.
Well, so let me back up. So I think your pre-application conference should include somebody from the Public Works staff who could give sort of preliminary and say, well, here's the things I think we need to deal with, as opposed to waiting further down the road. And then the other question I wanted to ask is, I'm a little concerned that the partial due diligence team is a little too internal, and it might be a good idea to have one person who's some sort of financial person that might be outside of us to give us sort of, and I know we're going to get more of that down on the due diligence, full due diligence with the bond counsel and those sort of things, but maybe having a perspective by someone else who's not part of the internal team just to round that out. I mean, you all have good perspectives and you all are going to be looking out for the best city's interest, but sometimes it's good to have one other little voice out here saying, let me look at it from a different standpoint.
Well, that would be the financial review firm that's already in the packet.
And they're in the partial due diligence?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's an outside firm already. So that's already built in. And we had the discussion last time on November. So you have, so now you have the full due diligence team. And then based on what based on what the full due diligence team learns, and based on whether the project still fits your vision and still fits your goals, then it goes forward. And if it doesn't, it still goes forward. You'll see it no matter what, just as before, but with a recommendation from the due diligence team. And then if the project fits your vision, then it goes forward on to land use contingent, but it's a contingency on the, it's approved contingent upon land use. So that's where it ends there. Now, we didn't go in through the entire land use process. That's a whole different process, but that's where it ends at that point.
You probably don't know the whole process anyway, so there you go. We don't need to know that.
It doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah, well, it's important, but it's not critical to what we're talking about.
So are there any questions from that, based on this?
Well, I would say having, and Ms. Griffin is part of that, having said no to projects that didn't make it out of the full due diligence team, it never went to our commission. Once it didn't make it out of that, it was like, it's a no-go.
So it's your preference if would you like to see it or would you not?
I would say if it doesn't have a snowball's chance, then don't even bring it up. For me personally, don't even bring it. But I don't know how the others feel. That's just me personally.
To some extent, I mean, we are the visionaries of how this operates. Many of these properties we've got, in fact, are city-owned properties. I think specifically the Cove and so forth. And there are obviously some of these projects we are going to be directly involved in the process.
Any other preferences?
They're not speaking today.
I don't know how formal you would like this. You just want us to speak out?
It's a retreat. This is a retreat. We do not have to be formal.
Okay. I think it's fine as is. I think you've laid out a pretty good review process. It's much more clear than it was last time, so thank you very much for improving and listening to my complaints about the last version. So I appreciate it's much more readable and understandable about who's who and who's doing what. I do have some comments on this graph. I think the diamonds are technically they're decision points by the URC. And so in my opinion, that recommendation to URC is confusing in that first diamond. To me, that should be preliminary review. And because I believe that's what's happening there is the result of the preliminary review and the URC decision. And then I have an issue with the second diamond, same kind of thing. It's presenting as if that's a recommendation. The recommendation is the yes or no box. What the decision is the
Commission. Is that what you're saying? The decision is the commission?
The decision, no, well, the decision is in the diamond box. I think you have the right shapes, but there's a decision there and it reads like it's a recommendation when clearly a decision is being made as to whether or not there's a deal or no deal. And so I just think the language is a little confusing by saying recommendation, because the recommendation is being represented on this graph as a yes or no square, which is fine, because to me that tells me there's a decision, or maybe something could be added to the yes or no box. But so anyway, am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just a terrible designer of artwork.
So yes, and so is that second diamond, would you consider that like a preliminary? Is it a preliminary review by the Urban Renewal Commission? Because if we say yes, then it goes to the DDA. The DDA is the final thing, right? Okay.
Correct.
It should probably say, application submitted, preliminary review of applicant, recommendation to URC by staff, decision by Urban Renewal Commission in the first diamond.
Yeah.
That's a no deal or a yes.
Right.
And then we come around, in-depth review of application by full due diligence team, recommendation to URC on DDA, and then in the diamond, decision by URC.
Yep,
Either no deal, yes, and the DDA is approved, and we move on with land use.
correct. Yeah.
If I may, there was some concern about Public Works Director being involved. I really think that's critical because,
No, I wasn't concerned. I just said, at that juncture, seems like it should be earlier.
okay. Well, you're probably right, because when I was looking at the list here, and probably what's going to happen, a lot of things are going to be directed by, in our northern end by what happens on the Rossman landfill. And what happens there is going to impact so many of the other properties that we've got listed here. The Metro Transfer Station, the Amtrak Station, what we call there the Stimson's property, even though it doesn't belong to Stimson's anymore. And,
Well, back then it didn't.
and Biotech as well. So I think as these some of these projects when come forward are going to trigger needs and other things for many other of the projects that are there. So I think that's part of a thing that can only be addressed, I think, in terms of public works, in terms of the infrastructure to support all those properties. I mean, I hate to have something coming in that only addressed one of the properties coming in when we, in fact, we know there are various projects that are there.
We have a TSP, which outlines improvements for areas not project specific. So there's more of a global view of what would happen.
And this is one area where I think that has to be the case.
Yeah. But like I said, I was looking at it from coming in, Public Works coming in there. He can come in, I'm sure John's going to delegate it to somebody. I'm not seeing him sitting in those meetings. But that's just me.
Yeah, so one option would be in the narrative on page, I guess it's 11. It's at the very top of page 11, where you're talking about bringing in the partial due diligence team. We could add a note there that additional members from the due diligence team may be requested for input depending on the nature of the project or something like that.
Or complexity of the project.
Like give a little leeway there in case. That gives you more flexibility for having a set team, and then we can bring in others as needed, or.
All right.
Yeah. Somewhere it should say, others as needed, just because you don't want to box yourself in to say, oh, it's only these, because we didn't think about that. But there's always, we might have a project that we might be involved in that we're going to be asked to have public art. So we would need somebody who's got that expertise as opposed to the people on that particular list who may or may not have that expertise.
All right. Any other suggestions? Those are good.
I have a question or comment, but not about this piece, so I'll wait till this is done.
All right.
Adam, anything from you at this point?
Yeah, I was just going to, I agree with what Commissioner Lyle Smith said about the diamond decision points. I think those were some good comments on some clarifications over there. And I would also like to say that I don't have a problem just having them all come to us as it is presented.
Yeah. I was having a flashback to my project management class where we had to line up all those boxes and they had to be certain shape. Bill's nodding his head because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. So I think that's what you were referring to too, is that they have in the PMP, they have certain shapes for certain things. And so we probably should align it with that because that's pretty well known in the standards.
There's whole professions around that. There's whole professions doing
Yes, that's all we do is make those charts.
I just think I thought I was being an artist.
You were. You're being very artistic. I mean, I noticed you had some ovals and you had some rectangles. So, but yeah, there is a standard in, and that might be something that Mr. Conkle could assist with, not doing it, but he's gone through some of that before, so he knows about those boxes and shapes and which ones mean which.
All right. Anything else before we go to the next item?
I have one question. On page 6, in the guidelines and project evaluation criteria, in that section, the third paragraph, the leading sentence, I'm confused, I just want clarity on, it says, "The urban renewal district shall have the option of amending or waiving sections of this policy when determined necessary or appropriate." Is that supposed to be urban renewal commission instead of
Yes,
urban renewal
it should be
district?
commission.
Okay. All right, that's all I had.
Okay.
Did everybody note that location that she was speaking of?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
All right. With your permission, we can move on to the financial update. And here is Matt Zook with our finance department to provide you with his insight.
Good evening, Commission, and it's been a year since I think the last financial update, and here this week you'll get two, tonight and tomorrow night. But James had asked me to, one, give you an update on where we've been, and traditionally where I think of where we've been is as of a June 30 date, and I provided that in the staff report as well as up to earlier this week. So there's really two components of my staff report, and hopefully it was clear as you read it, but we'll cover the first topic, which would be the financial position of the urban renewal as it stands at those two dates. And then tomorrow night you'll get the full meal deal. I won't go through every page, but it'll be presented, the full financial reports. What I'm giving you tonight in the staff report is just an overview, a really simple overview. The second topic that I wanted to discuss, or at least, bring forward, was essentially how much remaining margin of legal spending limit does the agency have. And James and I have been discussing the time value money, and I'm sure I'm going to make an assumption that everybody does know that, but I broke it down a little bit further. Hopefully that can add some scope, some narrowness, I suppose, to your future discussions about where do you go with projects and what your capacity really is. So looking at the staff report, essentially you are familiar with the fact that the Urban Renewal Agency is debt-free. I believe you've heard that in the last year, 2021, the payments were made off, and that's reflected now by virtue in the column 2021. The urban renewal composition is pretty much the investment in the capital assets, and then as of 2021, 1 year's worth of property tax revenue. And it's about $3 million a year. And so what's reflected in the second column, dated March 28, 2022, is another year's worth of property tax revenue. About 90% of it's received in the first two payments, which November, February, and May, I believe, are the dates. Anyway, so about majority of this current fiscal year's property tax revenues come in. So in that second column, you'll basically see that the Urban Renewal Agency has just slightly over $6 million as of present day. So it's really as simple as that. There's no debt. There's just a little bit of transactional debt, and at the rate we're going now, that $3 million just continues to roll over year until we begin to see even more growth. That would be the design if this was to move forward. More investments are going to bring in more tax revenue, and you begin to accelerate. So I guess I'll pause there and ask if that's hopefully clear enough, and if there are any questions about the financial position. Okay. The second question that I posed it as a question, and this is, again, this is a discussion that James and I and Andy Parks had my concern was that, we're well aware that the 2007 plan had a $130.1 million maximum indebtedness, and in the course of the last, I guess, almost 14, 15 years, has spent about $23 million. And one of the things that I've really focused on is the fact that the original plan, I went back and looked at the original plan and found it very interesting that there's language in that plan that said that the Urban Renewal Commission at the time recognized the fact that the $130.1 million did not factor in the inflationary impact. I wasn't here at that time, so I don't know the robust discussion that was there, but $130.1 million then is not the same today, of course. The cost goes up every year, as we know. We're all experiencing that. But I was trying to get a more accurate number in 2022 dollars, so that if you, as a commission, are considering what do we want to do and what projects might we want to do, what kind of capacity do we have, what does that look like in today's dollars, so that you don't think I've got 130.1 million or 106 million and go spend it. Next thing you know, you just shot yourself in the foot again by virtue of inflation. So on page 3 of the staff report, beyond the background of what the plan entailed, the bottom line is that depending on the options that the commission chooses, which are detailed at the end, if, for example, they use debt, or if they don't use debt to move these projects forward, there's about $75 to $83 million worth of maximum indebtedness left. So there's a lot of assumptions in that. There's, like I said, whether or not you use debt, when you do the projects, how quickly you do the projects, the economic conditions, interest rates, et cetera. But rather than the 106.2 million margin that is there on paper, as you move forward, it would be prudent to consider less of that maximum indebtedness, because even if you go 20 years out, that 75 to 83 million is going to turn in and reach that $106 million. So I'm hoping that's clear. I try to keep it fairly basic, but one of the concerns that I was expressing, with James and the team was that, hey, let's try and get you as a commission a workable scope. 106 million is a large number anyways. 75 to 83 is still not much smaller, but clearly all of the projects in the original 2007 list can't be done. And so now, if it's, I think one of the benefits to this discussion is that, if there's momentum that needs to be coming from this commission, you don't need to swallow the whole project list as you had it in the beginning anyways. As you prioritize the projects, or however you approach it, whether it's one project, all projects, you program it all out. It's a smaller list than what you have, and at least gets you a workable margin within which to work today. From here, I guess, as you move forward and decide the direction of the Urban Renewal Agency, my role, I've been working with, we have a model that we're using that I essentially downloaded from our consultant, and now he's taught me how to fish, essentially, which is good because I'm free, he's not. But there's some factors here that I would say, keeping in mind, an updated project list is certainly one thing that you all have been working on. A timeline for the projects and the use of debt. As those become clearer to the commission, and there's more of a consensus or decision on which kind of appetite you have towards those, I can bring back more specific modeling or diagrams or a time frame or financial information that would educate you to what that looks like. So that is my staff report, and I would entertain any questions as you have. So, thank you.
I want to make sure I understand it, and I've had time value of money classes. So in plain language, are you saying when we set what was it, 106 million in 2007?
It was originally 130.1 million, and then it got down to 106 by virtue of, I guess, the Cove and other projects that.
Okay, so 2007 dollars are worth, if you look it up, are worth about 38% more than current dollars.
Correct.
So are
Whatever
you
that
saying
percentage is,
reduce that amount by, if we had 100,000, you're saying actually only have about 62,000 to spend?
Right.
Okay, that's, and in plain language, that makes absolute sense to me. Basically, our spending power with the same amount of dollars has been reduced by that amount.
The fascinating thing is that was done in 2007 by design with the knowledge, and some of you may remember that. I wasn't here, but what I had to wrap my head around looking at this project, looking at the project list, was wouldn't that 2007 list in 2007 dollars really, shouldn't the maximum indebtedness been set much higher in order to account for the inflation over 20 years that the plan was designed? And it was very helpful that the plan explicitly recognized we are not doing that, and for whatever the various reasons were, and they did acknowledge that at a future point, i.e. a commission in 2022, would have to make different decisions as to the longevity of the plan. So at least it was documented. It wasn't an oversight or a Scribner's error, but that's where you are today. So.
Got members of the community who are saying, well, you've got all this money to play around with, and I have continually said, no, we don't.
I think there's two things, right? The big thing is that the 130.1 is a hard cap.
Right.
It didn't adjust with inflation every year, right? So that project list, the longer that goes out, the less number of those projects can be completed because you have a hard cap number, yet all those 2007 construction costs, design cost, all those kept rising, right? I think the other thing, Matt, and I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but when we talk about the increment bringing in $3 million, and, we've talked a little bit about, what's the duration of this plan, right? If we set an end date, that's going to impact how much you can get done, right? So there's a big difference between being able to pay off debt over 20 years or if we want to close the district in 10 years. Right. And I don't know, did you have what 3 million roughly we could bond for right now?
Yeah. And I appreciate you clarifying that, because the assumption I made in coming up with that 75 to 83 million was a 20-year projection from here on out. So again, that's another factor. But right now, by virtue of the revenue that we're bringing in, we have the capacity to borrow about between 30 and 35 million dollars and have enough income on a recurring basis to make those debt service payments. And of course, as that 30 million gets invested, the revenue increases. And then ultimately, you can't go out and borrow all 75 million today. That would be about a $9 million annual debt service payment. So clearly you can't bite off the whole chunk today. And that's traditional for urban renewal agencies anyways. We're in a different position by virtue of having at least that much value in the district that's bringing in 300 or 3 million that would help us borrow 30 million, to get a jump start again.
But once again, I think it's important, that's based on a 20-year payback, right? So if you're going to go 10-year, just for simple math, let's just cut it in half, right? So 38 becomes 19. So, we just, I guess the point is we don't have the ability to go borrow $70 million.
Nope.
Right?
I presume that's in terms of tax revenue. Sales of property would not be included in that 131.
Correct. Okay. This is just based off of the increment coming in.
Yeah.
And Mr. Graham, can you tell us, I believe we have a consultant right now that's evaluating the current project list and coming up with new numbers based off of current dollars, is that correct?
Consultant did do a model, created a model that Matt here is using, and I think he did it using those projects.
I think what the model that I have is more of the financing piece. I think, I don't know what the current project, the current dollars of the
Yeah.
projects today.
I'm asking about the work, about the current project list, that there's a consultant working on it, and you're going to come back to us to help us understand what's on the current project list and what that means in current dollars, and maybe giving the Urban Renewal Commission an option to make edits to that project list, or maybe do prioritizations.
Yes, we actually, there are a couple of ways to do this. Obviously, we don't have enough debt capacity to do all the projects. So there are a couple of ways to do this. Tonight, actually, if you're prepared, you can take a look at the projects that you have that are yet to be done, because some of these projects have already been accomplished. And look at the projects that are yet to be done and that you're interested in doing, and identify those projects. And you can also prioritize them. And then pricing has to be, an analysis has to be done on those projects to see whether or not those projects, to see whether or not our debt capacity can pay for those projects, or which ones it can pay for.
Sure. I guess I thought we had a consultant on board that was already coming up and
Not
doing
yet.
an evaluation of project cost.
Not at this point.
Oh, okay.
I thought the same thing.
Well, then what were they doing? Because I know we brought a consultant on to look at the project list, I thought.
I thought exactly the same thing as you.
Yeah.
So
That-
did I.
That was my understanding, that was happening.
What the consultant did for us was, they did a couple of things. They did the public information process, the public discussion. Also, they did take a look at the projects, but they didn't price them. They didn't do project pricing of them, unless I'm wrong with it. They didn't do project pricing. They basically worked with us in order to have an education about the urban renewal to the community. That's primarily what you asked them to do.
No, I know, and we did all of that work, and then this was an item that I'm pretty sure the phrase was, we don't actually need your permission. This was a piece that was kind of planned, and you felt like it was needed, and we had authority to do.
Right, and that's where we brought in Andy to help
Yeah.
set up the model that we have to be able to input
For Matt.
projects for Matt
Okay.
to be able to then, whether it's going to be 20-year or 10-year. So we've created that model that we can then input our project costs into to be able to run against what we assume the increment's going to be.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, that's not what I understood you were doing, so that's helpful to
Yeah.
get clarity.
I think we all thought,
I think
thought
we
they were
all thought
taking-
we were doing what I thought, right?
yes.
I thought they were taking, when projects were stated in 2007 dollars, what would the current cost be?
Yeah.
Yeah,
$2,020 or
Yeah.
$21 we
That
talked
was a
about.
simple, that's what
Yeah.
I thought.
That's what I thought they were
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, let me clarify it. So that is an easy enough mathematical, I've got that. I haven't looked in depth at all of the projects. What hasn't been done is whether or not those, I can do it on a mathematical inflationary level.
Sure.
I can't go back and say, okay, I'm making some assumptions about the cost of construction, inflation and stuff like that. So yes, I have that, but it's a mathematical, it's not has the scope changed or anything like that.
Yeah.
Anything in depth beyond the math.
So if you think about it,
Okay.
it's the worst of both worlds.
Yes.
Yeah, getting
Because
cheated on both
projects-
ends.
The
Yeah.
projects were stated in those dollars, and now they cost more to make, and those dollars are worth more, and now they're worth less, so it's almost a
Right.
double loss.
So in a way, it really probably is just as well that we didn't do that, because I anticipate we're going to change the project list based on the discussions that we already had, and so there's no point in doing the math or to see, well, project A was, 5 million in 2007, and now it's 25 million. I don't want to make the decision about a project based on the cost. If it's something we're committed to and it checks all the boxes that we've looked at, then it costs what it costs, and we're going to try to make it work. I'm not.
Sure, I don't have a problem with that.
I think that's kind of, yeah, but.
I was
you-
just
you were-
like,
you
I
were
was
under the same-
expecting
some
something
more,
else to
yeah.
be coming from
Yeah.
this latest effort, but I understand now.
Yeah.
It was work that was essentially to assist Mr. Zook with the financial modeling and such, and you're not bringing an updated project
No.
list with updated numbers back to us or
No.
anything like that.
Mr. Zook's correct. He could do a mathematical swing at it and say, construction costs are up 50%
Sure.
and your value of your money is down 40%.
Sure.
So what do you want to do?
Right,
What can you
right,
afford?
right.
Yeah.
Right. I can do that. I'm not out in the field to even know if the landscape's even changed.
50%, yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if I know Oregon City enough, but
Yeah.
it would be purely math at this point.
Sure.
And so essentially one of my, coming back from the commission would be, once a project prioritization, or whether it's one project or 5 projects, once you're set on that, based on, I think, the framework that James prepared, you run through that grid process, however you want to value your projects, then I have something to work with.
Yeah.
And I can go out and
I agree.
bring in people to project those.
Okay.
So we have a list of projects. In the staff report, I took the 14 projects and listed them for your convenience right in the staff report. And as I said earlier, some of those projects have already been done, and others have not been done for one reason or another. So if you would like, you could actually go through these projects and determine which ones you'd like to go forward with in terms of preference, and then the analysis could be done, the math that could be done, and see where we are.
You want comments at this time on that?
Sure.
I've heard the county shops are under private ownership, so we won't be procuring that property.
Let's start from number 1 and then go down.
Which one?
Just start from the first one.
Yeah,
and go
these
on
are
down.
not in order of priority, you just numbered.
Yeah, I just numbered. These
Yeah.
are not in order, prior. I just numbered it from the
Before we
from the
start
plan.
that,
I just took them from the plan and put them on the paper.
before we start that, I think we need to reiterate that what I heard this commission say and what we voted on is that we were going to look at projects that involved property that we owned. That was our priority. And so I would say that if there's properties within these areas that we own, that's where we really ought to start, as opposed to, the Oregon City Shopping Center. Well, we don't really own that, and that project, I believe, was put in there back in the day, Tony, and correct me, because we were looking at helping them do some retail buildings up towards the front of the street. We helped them, we were going to help them do that type of a thing. That didn't happen. We ended up doing something where we helped them finance some of those facade improvements that they did to make it, to freshen it, because, let's face it, it kind of looked tired there.
I think in the TSP, Dune Drive was going to connect down to Main Street Extension.
Yes.
And, that was going to be a significant infrastructure
Investment, yeah.
improvement.
Well, I guess I would say, I think that is one of the priorities. I wouldn't exclude other properties.
No, I'm just saying that was where we said we would start.
Okay, but I wouldn't do it at the exclusion of non-urban renewal owned properties, is what I'm saying. I'm not sure, unless you have a plan on how you want to do this prioritization exercise. I'm not sure that this will be fruitful unless you have a plan on like raising hands or some dot exercise.
No dots, please.
No dots.
I mean, there has to be some way though for every single one of us to provide input on priorities. I would just be interested in knowing which ones are not applicable anymore, because I don't think I know
yeah.
which those are.
Right, I'm not even sure we're on the same page as which ones are done.
Right. So
And
I think
again,
that's the
what are we
start.
considering done? I was talking to James about that, and I said,
I can
this is
see
mostly
someone
done.
saying the Amtrak station's done, it's not.
It's mostly done.
Well, if you want it to be a restaurant, which is what the intention was not. The intention was it was a restaurant temporarily until it was a train station, and so that's not done, in my mind. So those are things we.
I thought that was what I was starting to do, but.
Yeah, we were starting to see which ones were done.
Yeah, the county, and which ones we might not want to do. I mean, the county shops are in private ownership now. So
When did that happen?
I know that it happened, I don't know when it happened.
In the last year or so?
Yeah,
Well, I know that it was in,
Yeah.
it was in some sort of flux, but whether that happened
oh no, it's been purchased.
or
I
not.
think it's done, yeah.
Yeah, it's done.
I'm pretty sure it's done too.
So you were saying the county shop property is done?
Yeah, county shops.
That's the stuff along Abernathy.
Yep. It has its own plan for development, is
And,
essentially.
Which is interesting because I think it's zoned industrial or something like that, so that'll be interesting.
Okay.
Number 7 is we own it, so.
I don't know by that description what Stimson property is.
Stimson Lumber used to be on that site where the Clackamas landscape is.
Clackamas landscape.
Oh, it's the landscape
Yeah.
place.
So
Okay.
we own that.
Kruger Lumber.
So again, a reference to something from a long time ago won't be helpful. I'm a perfect example of that, so
Lumber
like.
is on the west side of
Where you cross the
Washington
bridge.
Street. It used to be Kruger Lumber, and there is an
Antique shop.
antique shop and a truck something or other in there. So
Right.
it is.
I know where the antique shop on the
Yeah, it had
corner.
been repurposed, but it has not been redeveloped.
So next time, perhaps we could have like little landmark addresses or like
This is a list
up-to-date
from
names of what they are.
2007.
Yeah.
This is a test, so we're seeing how much you've done research to know what these old names
I have
are.
not done research.
I know you have. I'm
It's because we've been here for a long time.
I know, and I get that, but I'm telling you, I mean, yeah, I'm a perfect example. I don't know what those are. I can't help you
I had
out.
to explain to James what Kruger, I mean, anybody that's got an old house knows about Kruger Lumber because we all went there to buy old stuff.
So in James's report, he included the existing urban renewal plan. So
Yeah.
if maybe you could flip to page 34 of the packet, it starts at the very bottom with a brief description of each of those projects that are identified in his staff
Yeah.
report. So if you get to page 34, it'll say, towards the middle, it'll say B projects, and then underneath that, at the very bottom, it'll say 1 Rossman landfill, mixed-use lifestyle center consisting of approximately 950,000 square feet of retail, 100,000 office, 250 residential. The anticipated urban renewal investment is approximately 30 million. The anticipated private investment is,
What page?
it's 34 of your packet.
Look at the very bottom, there's a square that has
On the right side,
in
it'll be in
gray, and it's got the page numbers.
Mine only goes to
But if you
30.
look at your pack, I mean, also, it's page 14, if you just look at the document itself.
So, yeah.
I look at the plan itself, it says page 14.
Can you zoom back in, Jacob? Yeah.
Well, I think we
Is
can,
everybody able to locate that in their
Yeah.
packet?
yeah, I've got it. We can eliminate the Metro property because they're not going anywhere at the moment, but it could come up in the future, but from my committee work with them, after they rejected the Jennifer Street project, they're back to square one pretty much now, which is kind of discouraging.
So, was everybody able to locate that? So this would at least give you some idea of what the project thoughts were when this
And we
plan
still
was
own the Orange
created.
Station property, right?
So obviously we have
Yes.
Rossman landfill as number 1. Number 2, Clackamas Cove, mixed-use housing development, improvements, anticipated urban renewal investment, 8 million, anticipated private investment, 160. Number 3, Metro Transfer Station, no urban renewal revenues are expected to be invested. Private sector has not been estimated. Amtrak station, we've constructed the first phase of the project, which consists of the entry driveway, limited parking, and train platform for loading and unloading passengers. Phase 2 consists of acquiring and moving a historic depot to the project site, building additional parking and landscaping. Urban renewal is committed to 1 million. So I appreciate Commissioner Smith where what its end use is, but I think a significant amount of that is done in terms of
Right.
the site prep, moving the building, and whatnot. So I kind of think of that one as done. There may be some incremental costs if it changes to something different, from a restaurant to more of a train depot, but it's not going to be anywhere near probably $1 million.
Before you move on, so I have a philosophical question for you, Tony. So we have adopted, as Rocky will attest to, many plans and documents. we have a major conflict between the urban renewal plan and the adopted by the city end of the Oregon Trail Master Plan. And that has never been resolved in any way. So I see, I'm just saying philosophically, we have a little bit of a conundrum there, a quandary. I mean, we spent lots and lots of money creating that plan and adopting it and creating a vision for what we wanted to see. And so when the hotel came and talked about redevelopment, that was part of that big plan. There was always planned to be a hotel across the street, some other things going on. So, I don't know, is that?
I don't think,
I mean, you're aware of it. I don't think any of the others, you're aware of it, but yeah, I mean, it's just something that it sort of comes up every so often, and I'm saying, well, why, I've gotten questions like, well, what's happening? I said, well, we have a master plan for the development of that site. And so the golf driving range was only going to be there temporarily. I mean, it was a temporary use. It was not going to be there like permanently, although, we could maybe find someplace else for it, since I like to go over there sometimes and practice, so.
I guess I'd want to get back to you.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to answer the question right now, I'm just saying, it's out there.
I don't know that the end of the Oregon Trail Plan was ever adopted. I know that there was a lot of work that went into
The
it.
design guidelines were not adopted, but the master plan was adopted.
Seen that same argument.
Yeah, that's major legal question, because that's come up, but.
Yeah, well, because we adjudicated that, and we knew that the design guidelines were proposed to be adopted, but they were never adopted, but the master plan was. And that was not the crux of that particular issue. It was the design guidelines, not the document.
Can we go through the list?
Yeah, so anyway, we can talk about it later. I'm just saying it's out there. At least in my mind, it is.
So number 5, the county shop property, housing and mixed-use development consistent with development of area. County at that time had indicated $5.1 million for purchase. Should the urban renewal agency purchase this property to facilitate this development, the agency anticipates a return of a portion of this investment to match its purchase price. Additionally, the agency anticipates a private investment of approximately 40. So once again, I think that one is moving into or is already into private ownership.
Isn't that zoned industrial?
No, I think it's mixed use downtown,
How could it be mixed use downtown and have a county shop on it?
pre-existing, non-conforming, kind of like Miles Fiberglass. We had several
County's been down there for a long
pre-existing
time.
developments.
County's been down there for a long time.
Oh, I know.
City-owned property on McLaughlin. Conceptually, the agency is seeking opportunities for commercial mixed-use development that is consistent with the Oregon City Regional Center development. The agency is prepared to invest approximately $2 million to create a private investment of approximately 15. I think that this is the property next to KFC.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
the 12th and Main.
I think, without it.
Because I was trying to think what else was on McLaughlin. Yeah, that would be the only.
That's the only one we have that's
I mean,
fronting
the
on.
only other one would be over by McDonald's, but,
Right.
there were certain
the old sewer.
limitations associated
You
with
can
that
move
one.
McDonald's.
Stimson, conceptually, this property, which is located between the city's Amtrak station and Metro's transfer station, so this is where the landscaping,
Clackamas Landscape.
Clackamas Landscaping is located, is discussed as a site for a major Class A office development with lower level of parking, consistent with the plan. Agency is prepared to invest approximately $10 million in urban renewal, $60 million private. Number 8, Oregon City Shopping Center. Subsequent to development of the Clackamas Cove, the city owned property along Highway 99 and the development of the landfill area. The agency anticipates that the owner of this property may modernize. The plan would like to see additional transit-oriented buildings along McLaughlin corridor with parking more centralized and perhaps a connecting roadway or bike ped through the center to the Cove development. Agency is prepared to invest approximately $2 million.
Yeah, I don't think
Kruger
you have to- I don't
Lumber.
think you have to read all these.
Okay.
I would be in agreement with you, Chair McGriff. I just feel I was actually encouraged by the flow chart where the first block said RFP, and almost like RFP generated by this Urban Renewal Commission, where we had an idea and we designated what we wanted to do. And rather than being carried along like a stick in a stream, we did something and we made that happen. And that's been bothering me for years. And if we can do it with URC-owned property, great. I think we have to consider if it's financially feasible. I'd like to demonstrate a success for those in the community, and we would get support from the very people who you think are opposed to URC if it was project-based and we could demonstrate its value to the community. We don't have to build the biggest, greatest, we have to build a success. And I'm apprehensive about entering into a single project whose magnitude is so great that the commitment serves to exclude all other opportunities that may present themselves. So those are the criteria I'm thinking about. And I would love for us to say, we want to do this and send out an RFP for it.
I think that was, you're really talking about the summation of what we talked about when Commissioner Smith was advocating for us to start with our own properties. We control them.
I agree with that.
We have the ability to say, as you aptly stated, if we put out a request for proposal, we are seeking development opportunity with whomever, and we want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We want.
This is what we want. If you are interested, please come on and talk to us about it. That's exactly what we talked about doing, because we have to start with stuff that we control. We can't start with something that somebody else controls because we're subject to the whims and fancies of whatever's going on. But we can control what we have and put it out there, because I know, as you know, not everybody's going to come to the dance unless they get an invitation. So if we put out an invitation, we can select from our own dance card and say, yeah, we think this one meets our goal, or we think this one doesn't. And I think that, again, to also add in what Commissioner Lyle-Smith said, not to the exclusion, but we make it clear this is our starting point. And these other things, if an opportunity comes up, we can consider that. But I agree. I think we need to start with what we control. We can't control other people's properties. And so much of this plan right now is based on one certain thing happening to the exclusion of all other things. And I think, as you again aptly stated, that if we start, as a matter of fact, when I talked to James today, I said, what's going on with 10th and Main? Because I thought that was going to help jumpstart us. And I understand where they are, and I understand how things go, but I think we are now at a point in the next month or two, we want to start seeing some action come out of that.
That's right.
To use that as a catalyst to jumpstart our next project, which is something that we come up with.
To me, small successes have more value to this community than a long-term project that may not come online for years.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Just one question though. I don't know the answer to this. It is interesting to bring up. Yes, you have properties that you control, that you own. But there are also properties in the urban renewal district that you have a great deal of influence over. Almost
a great deal of what?
Influence.
Oh, okay.
A great deal of influence over, and to the point where you actually almost, you would think that you do own it, but your influence is pretty heavy over it. So do you consider those projects, while they're not legally yours, you have such influence over it?
I'll try clarifying for a moment. Influence in what form? By providing or denying financial support?
Yes.
Well, that's talking around the issue. I mean, the ownership of real property and the ability to do something with it is a fast track to accomplishing something. I'm just concerned about, I talked to the opponents of urban renewal, and they would be on board for something that generated exactly what urban renewal is supposed to do, and a small victory would go a long way to the next project.
I think it's a great idea. I think there's general consensus behind that. We just have to figure out what the heck we want to put an RFP out for.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, and get moving, because as we've learned earlier, our dollars are dwindling by just sitting here and not doing anything.
And that's called leadership, and that's what we're supposed to do.
It's called the shrinking dollar.
And I agree basically with what you're just saying, but I think what was being, you've indicated here, there might be projects coming forward that we can influence their development by offering support for things that we want out of it. So I agree with the focus on properties we own. Don't mistake me,
I wasn't
but
saying to the
we're not
exclusion.
closing.
Yeah, no, we're not
doing it
no,
to
we're not closing the
exclusion.
door.
And I agree with what you say.
Yeah, we're not closing the door. I'm not saying to the exclusion. I'm just saying that that's our priority, is to do that first. And as if an opportunity comes up, as they do, we know that they do, we can consider that at that time. But, you know, we're saying that's our priority.
I'm going to put this, I don't know what else we'd be doing here, but I'm going to make a suggestion. I mean, I personally crossed off some things here, and maybe we ought to take a look at these lists, not necessarily here, but individually, you see what we think we don't want to support. And just simply get them off the list, period.
I guess, you know, so the ones we own, I agree, are the easier ones, right? I think the question is, you know, I don't know if
Easy
we
is
can-
relative.
well,
Yeah, they're easier
relative.
because we
Yep.
control them, but yeah.
You know, it's going to be, you know, I guess the question is, how much do we want to invest as the district, right? To make whatever we decide that RFP is, right? And so that's one part of this. A second part of this is going to be that, you know, there are certain projects that we've talked about that are public projects, quiet zone, parking garage, right? That's kind of a public-private quasi-partnership, right? And then you're going to have these private developments that come in that are encumbered by flood zones, landfills, difficult properties. You know, so I don't know if we can start thinking of them as kind of three buckets. You know, we've got our properties that are controlled. We control the land's an asset. It can be part of any deal. You know, do we have to put more money in depending on where the site is? You know, Stimson, where you've got to get up out of the floodplain, the Cove, you've got to get up out of the floodplain versus 12th and Main. A little bit different scenarios there, but we own the dirt, which, you know, potentially becomes part of a project deal.
Are there any properties within the boundary that are not owned by the agency but are owned by the city?
10th and Main, next to McDonald's.
Okay, 10th and Main, I knew that. So the property on either side of McDonald's is owned by the city, not the Urban Renewal Agency. Okay. So I'm sure we can talk to the city about putting out an RFP on city-owned property as well as urban renewal property.
Sure, we can have whatever cover, yeah. You know, I guess we were focusing on the district-owned properties
Right.
because there's not a lot of them at the end of the day.
12th and Main is city, not urban renewal?
Pretty sure,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. because that's the McLaughlin one.
Yeah.
And then we have these public investment projects, like before we did 7th Street, we did a public project with urban renewal funds as partial, but we did some of 99E. You know, we're looking at 99E from 10th to the tunnel. You know, is that an urban renewal project? Does the quiet zone have a component of urban renewal? Does a parking structure have a component of urban renewal? And then, like I said, I think we have that third bucket of, you know, properties that are going to be challenging because of location or existing conditions. Do we want to set aside money for that?
Maybe.
I don't know if that's a way to approach this, because we're going to have to somehow start to put some dollars next to projects, I believe. I think one of the goals was a little bit more specificity on a project list that can be delivered. So when I think about it, I kind of think of them in kind of they're three very different types of projects at the end of the day.
Makes total sense to me. And what's the financial commitment to accomplish each of them?
So we've got some infrastructure projects, which is what I would consider a quiet zone or a parking structure or improvements to I want to call it McLaughlin Boulevard when we get into the city, because when people start talking about 99, they think of a highway. So McLaughlin Boulevard, which we talked about, making that more of a user-friendly facility as opposed to, let's just, get through it real fast and get to the tunnel and get out through Kenema. So that to me is an infrastructure project which we can control and we can contribute money to, in addition to getting money to match projects. So I guess we're already starting on, John was telling me about where we're on the next phase of McLaughlin Boulevard to put in some of those pedestrian improvements. So that's, to me, that's an infrastructure project. So we've got at least 3 that you've mentioned, infrastructure type projects.
And the one I didn't is, under the current boundaries of the district, the front office building and parking lot at Blue Heron is in the district as well. So whether that's, the Riverwalk component of that or something else, but, just remember though, that's kind of the extent of the boundary there.
That one could get interesting depending on developments in the future on.
Yes, it could.
I'd almost look for a project that was complementary to existing resources. And that's not a backdoor way of saying parking structure, but it is. Because would a parking structure help our downtown and drive value? Then the question always is, and we've touched on it, who wants to operate a parking structure? The city doesn't, I don't think. Would a private party, is there value in it to them to operate it? I don't know. I've never had that
I need
conversation.
to comment on this. I hear the cost associated with per vehicle parking structure.
Parking
And
space,
if I go down McLaughlin, there in our urban renewal district, there are actually some of those parking places are free. You don't see anybody in them. You've got, and once you really go beyond 10th, although corner 14 may change that, you see a lot of empty parking places. People don't want to walk 4 blocks to get to someplace.
No, they don't.
And I really have a problem with parking structures when in fact there's available parking on our public streets down there. And people just simply aren't using them.
Quite honestly, Doug, the other thing that may change that is what's the Grand Ron tribe going to do in terms of parking on their property? Maybe that'll provide parking for people to use.
Well, then we're coming to the point where I've said it in both of my interviews, and I think that we ought to consider a swap of land. And when I was thinking of that, I was thinking, do the Grand Ron pay taxes to the city?
Yes.
Yes.
I was thinking, there's a swap out. And I'm not saying what ought to be swapped. I think that's a major discussion in its own right. But it's a partnership that we have built on, and I know issues have come up in intertribal relations in terms of fishing rights. I don't think that's our concern.
Not.
That's a tribal concern.
No, yes, it is.
But in terms of the Riverwalk, we're not going to have people fishing off the Riverwalk. And in terms of developing that kind of partnership, I think maybe that ought to be a proactive piece on the part of the Urban Renewal Agency, I should say, directing staff to perhaps start things. Another thing that I'm thinking, I'm going to talk about the Clackamas Cove, is Gladstone has gotten a substantial amount of money from Metro for a design project on a pedestrian bike bridge where the Union Pacific used to be. That'd have to go into our landfill area, into our Clackamas Cove area. And I think we should kind of reach out, not telling them what the design should be, but indicate we have some possibilities on our side of the river that maybe can be incorporated and also be a basis of them seeking additional funding in the future.
I think they are aware of that because.
Well, I do.
Yeah.
I'm sure they are aware of that. But
The city participated in their initial planning to get the
But I'm looking at
grant.
the Urban Renewal Agency and land we actually own.
Okay.
I'm a firm believer that the commission can walk and chew gum at the same time. And there are projects that we own that we could certainly get started on and have great influence on. But there are also projects that we have great influence over with regard to financing them. You can do both things. One doesn't have to be done first and one doesn't have to be second, but you can actually do both things. And one project, the projects that we own, I believe can happen faster. Projects that we have great influence over, through financing, it's going to take a little time. So you can do both. You can hedge your bets. You can diversify. It doesn't have to be one.
I worry about expending all the resources on a single project to the exclusion of others. I think there's some easy wins with interested parties that are not large, that fulfill all the requirements. You know, the other thing we always have to talk about is, let's talk about the entrances to our city. What do we want them to look like? You know, I mean, Stimson's come up. I've talked about Stimson many times. I know there's people that want to develop that. I know it could be developed. I know that the type of office building that would be put there would lend itself to ground level parking and second level offices. I know there's a demand for for flexible buildings in the 50,000 square foot range. I mean, it's not a giant project.
But the interest to our city.
Do you want that at the interest to your city?
Well, that's not, to me, that's not the entrance to our city. Unfortunately, at that street, the entrance to our city is the big City of Oregon City sign, and then we got Discount Tire on the other side. That's the entrance coming in.
Well, then it's already what it is.
I know, but, you know, that's not what I think of as a grand entrance.
No, it's not.
The nice sign is great, and the berm is great, but it's the other side that I find, you know, as I'm coming into town, I'm like, oh, Discount Tire, great. You know, I mean, I like the fact that they're here, but it's not super attractive. Okay, so what do we want to, what do we want to, Doug has suggested we take the county shops property and put it in a third tier sort of category, kind of somebody else is dealing with it.
It's not ours.
It's not ours.
Not under consideration.
I think the same thing is true of Kruger. Oregon City Shopping Center.
Well, I think whether or not something's privately owned or publicly owned isn't the deciding factor of whether or not we do urban renewal project on it.
I agree with you.
The county shops property is being removed because we know that there's a planned development
Yeah,
happening there. It's
right.
owned by a private.
And it's not within the urban
And it's-
renewal boundary, so we don't really care.
Yeah, so that one's easy. The Oregon City Shopping Center, though, I mean,
It's in.
it was predicated on this assumption that maybe the owner of the shopping center may want to do something. I mean,
Okay.
low on my priority list, but if they came up with a good project. I don't know that I would remove it from the list just because,
I'm not saying remove it, I'm just saying we've got some categories and it's kind of in a third tier category.
well, we haven't defined what those categories are, so I'm not sure how we're moving these things
Yeah.
around. The only ones I know of is removing the ones that aren't applicable anymore, which is county shops property, and I know nothing about Kruger lumber, so what are we stating about Kruger lumber? Are we stating that that property is,
It could be redeveloped.
Sure could.
It's got some opportunity to help expose Abernathy Creek. Right now, you don't even know that it's back there. And I think we heard a presentation recently about how Abernathy Creek could be improved, and that could be part of a project. But it's a very large, older building that was a lumber company. I mean, it was stacked higher and deeper with
got a ton
lumber
of
products
potential?
back in the day.
It's a great corner, got a ton of potential.
Yeah.
What else you got on your list, Doug?
Are we going to develop categories or we
I'm
just?
not sure what the civic complex is. I mean, I know it was something that was talked about earlier on in
was-
terms of grand
It was,
picture.
yeah, it was city, where they moved
City
the
Hall?
city hall.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
so we
so-
can remove that one then,
so that
right?
was
We're not
all-
doing anything else to City Hall?
Yeah, the original plan was to potentially looking at buying the property across the street on High I think the property behind City Hall
Yeah,
and making more of
Carnegie,
a
all that area.
campus
Oh.
on High
One
Street.
thing I don't know how you include it, but somehow we have to think about it. It looks like the county actually has money to build a courthouse. That's going to happen
We should
in
put
2 years.
possibly,
Courthouse.
we should have the courthouse on that
Yeah,
list.
So I
Other
think
things
we need to
add to
probably
the
bring the
list.
courthouse
Yeah.
up onto the list.
Yeah, well, they've got downtown, but
Yeah,
it needs to be more specific.
yeah. And,
But I think that's the double-edged sword a little bit, right? Is there a pot of money that's for assistance to private development, right? Or do we get into the specificity of, who knows on the county courthouse
Yeah,
or
right.
on the county shops, right? I mean, does the floodplain play into this in any way?
Right.
As wanting to
Plays into it
offset some of those
100%.
costs? Does the landfill play into this? Does the courthouse play into this because of the age of the structure and wanting to, I'm assuming we all want to keep that building, right? So the renovation, remodel costs associated with that are going to be
Substantial.
atypical to a usual structure.
so you want to put it back on the list?
The county shops?
Yeah. It is in the floodplain, so there are challenges associated.
Yeah, it's not on my high priority list.
Well, we don't know what the proposed development is or whether or not there's assistance that could be needed. So in that sense, there's no reason to remove it, right?
Right.
Well, one thing I'd like to mention though is lands that haven't been developed. I've mentioned this before. We've got a major regional trail system and it comes right through the Cove area and goes right up through one side of Highway 213. And there has to be some kind of opportunities to
They
deal
make a
with that. And
connection.
I would say perhaps keeping that private piece of land in the picture in terms of the potential of having a trail system right along Abernathy Creek, if we can work
Which
with
one?
it.
Kruger Lumber or the county shops?
And county shops. Because that trail system, you've got to connect it to 213 on the other side of 213 somehow. And it's coming right across Abernathy Creek for a long distance. And of course, I'm speaking from a different perspective of
I
an
said the
interest
same
I
thing about
have.
Kruger Lumber, because again, Abernathy Creek goes,
That's
Right
true, but
behind it.
I'm not sure, and that may well fall into the trail system as well, but I think those opportunities might be there in terms of both of those pieces of property.
well, I think we need to leave the end of the Oregon Trail on our list because it's a facility that we own. We're looking at it as it's a major attraction. It has not fared as well as we had hoped over the years, and, I would, as I've stated many times, I want the hoops back on top, the cloth back on top.
I guess I'm taking my cross outs and saying, let's not cross the mountain.
Yeah. We went around our hand to get back to
Yeah.
our thumb, but that's okay, we got there. I guess maybe one of the recommendations is for staff to come up with categories or tiers of
Yeah.
a good proposal and how we can look at dividing up the money that's available to us, which would give us something to work with versus something from scratch of trying to, I think that was a good idea. You're right. At some point, we'll have to figure out, do we want to spend all of our money in one pot, or is there a way to divvy up these, organize them by which ones are owned by the Urban Renewal Commission, stuff like that. I think you guys could probably come up with a good proposal to help us be more productive.
And I agree. Yes, we can. I think that it sounds like, I think there's consensus about, the properties we own, right? And I think it's more of how much do we want to invest in those? Maybe it's a pot of money for the three.
Sure.
Having been involved with the Cove, it's a negative $8 million a couple of years ago just to get it site ready, right? And so when we start to put those kind of numbers on here, we know what the quiet zone is. I don't know if that's a project that's urban renewal or not, right? We could come up with a, 250, 300 stall parking garage estimate, right? You're usually going to get a cost per stall, probably 40, 45,000. We can come up with those numbers. I think the point is, if we're going to, let's say we're being conservative at 75 million, it goes quick,
Sure.
especially when you start to think about, are we going to do anything with the landfill, right? Do we want to invest in the Riverwalk? 99E could be a significant investment, right? And then we got to balance that between the fact that we have to have some projects bring in increment. Because right now, over 20 years, really, we're probably in the 35, if we bonded it all, right? We need more increment to come in. We need some private tax roll money to hit the ground. Otherwise, we're stuck again. Right? So that's why I just want to be cautious of we need to identify projects that'll create increment.
And hopefully have a rapid rate of return.
Well, I did my 3 categories, so there we go.
Well, I guess we're done.
Yeah. You guys wanted to go home early? Okay, thank you.
Can I make one more comment about Willamette Falls? So you were specifically mentioning that office building property. Maybe just general comment is I think that when we should stay away from that property for a little while. If we were talking about the Riverwalk, that'd be a different conversation. But talking about that property at a time when that entire site is going through land use review or anything like that, I do not want to create any appearance of a quid pro quo or any type of deal that's happening. I don't want to ask staff. I wouldn't want to ask, and I'm not saying you were suggesting that, I'm just being very clear. I think we want to be really careful there and not asking staff to do something for urban renewal hat on and then turning around and having them do something and having to take off a invisible hat and put on a different role. I think it's a dangerous area. So.
No, I appreciate that. And I guess I should have been more specific. I guess in my mind, I was using the office as a reference point to that office building at the corner of 99 and Main in the parking lot. One of the things we've struggled with as a jurisdiction has been to come up with a local match of a significant amount to the funds that have been raised by the state and Metro. And so for me, I was thinking of Riverwalk match to the monies that have been identified from other agencies as a local share component.
I wanted to talk about my swap idea. That was not intended to be a quid pro quo thing. That was in terms of how they develop. Perhaps urban renewal funds could be helped to extend Main Street once they want to extend Main Street,
sure.
which they
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
I was not.
No, I don't, and I don't think you were saying to do that.
No.
My concern is that someone outside of this room, whether or not we think that's happening or not, and whether or not we say it's happening, we don't even want that appearance of it happening. Yeah, I wasn't at all saying you were doing that. I'm afraid someone would look at that and be like, what's going on between urban renewal and the tribe and Oregon City making decisions about that property? I just want to be really clear, because Oregon City has a role in the land use process, and we want that to be as clean and as transparent as possible.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to give any appearance that there was something happening behind closed doors, because we'll get.
Yeah, I guess another component of this is, are there projects that we didn't think of? Are there new projects?
Well, I think the courthouse is one of them. We didn't particularly think of it, but I threw the courthouse in with downtown. And I think the other thing we talked about downtown is that we wanted to help facilitate some upper story redevelopment, which means we're going to be looking at doing some assisting with some seismic upgrades, because that's what everybody's freaking out about, is that, we've got unreinforced masonry buildings that are going to need to be reinforced. And we know that coupled with the quiet zone can allow for that housing to happen downtown. I think as one of our goals, we talked about that. So that's something we don't have in here.
And along the same lines, I don't see a lot of mention to the North Main, which essentially Subaru,
Like 10th to 15th.
Miles Fiberglass,
I'd love
all
to
the
see
way
that
through there.
redeveloped.
We haven't, that's not acknowledged in here, and that's a very key connection from downtown to Washington Street and how those districts work together.
It's in here, it talks about how auto-oriented, and we need to
Yeah.
help change that.
But I don't think some of those are called out.
Well, and one of the things we had talked about in the past was kind of looking at a map of the district.
Yeah.
And creating, like, there's natural zones or areas, like that area you're talking about is a totally different look and vibe and feel than the true downtown
Yeah, I
core.
agree, yeah.
And I think we could start there too when we're thinking about what RFPs we want to put out on our properties or what's appropriate for those areas. I think that map and showing where our properties are and kind of natural zones of where things fit together would be helpful.
Well, and I thought, so I would love to do it, because I've so many times just wanted to have a weekend to just start drawing my own plan of what this town should be, because I have an idea in my head, and we all do. But yeah, exactly.
Oregon City, there you go.
But it goes back to that question. We're still asking questions about which properties we own and don't own. I know we've gone through this. I know
I wrote
this
it down. I'm
question
not
has
gonna
been
ask it
asked for
again.
15 years about which ones are urban renewal and which ones are city. Because there's properties I know we own that some of you, I'm sure, don't know that we own, that we really just need to see that on a map. We can, kind of look at
Yeah.
that and start, because I would love to just do that and kind of come up with the concepts of
Can we have
big picture.
GIS produce like an 11 by 17 URA map for us so we could draw on it individually draw it and basically say, okay, this is, the zone. Because to me, the area from 14th going towards Miles Mill, it's kind of like no man's land. I mean, I have actually walked over there, but it's completely unfriendly. It's, and we've never really looked at how to make it more, not transparent's not the word, there's no trees along the street, that type of thing, to make it more of a place you might want to walk, but, people are gonna go to Subaru, they're driving, they're not, I see a bike or two would be there occasionally, and some dogs, but, and then, Miles Fiberglass, I've been hearing for years, they're moving out of there, and somebody
Yeah, it's for
else-
sale.
it's for sale, somebody else is in there. But, the other key thing is we talked about those infrastructure projects. To me, it's going to be critical for us to get some of those improvements that John has already gotten grants for on McLaughlin Boulevard. I mean, we've started it, but we've got the next phase that is really going to knit the two things together. And I think we also need to look at, I don't know, it's not in the urban renewal area, but once you come out of the tunnel, what can we do to, it doesn't look like it's in Oregon City when you come out of the tunnel. And then you get to Kenema, and again, it's one of those, let's go 40 miles an hour really fast to get on out of here. We're going from one place to the other. There's not a good way that we've thought of as a city to how to knit that together. And when we did that plan with, that Kelly worked on the McLaughlin to Kenema thing, we're out there walking on that boardwalk, next to 99. Yeah, that was a real thrill. You got to do it once. We did pick a low traffic hour to do it, so it wasn't quite so bad, but I couldn't imagine walking that at, 5 o'clock in the evening.
Well, the other thing is, I don't know why anybody coming through Amtrak and through Oregon City would want to get off of that station by the appearance of the backside of the buildings
Right.
there that really don't attract anybody.
Well, but have you ridden Amtrak between here and, and wherever? That's the way it looks all the way through.
I know, but I think
We're saying we could do something different, is what you're saying.
even murals.
Yeah, James wants to paint the back of the building, so we gonna paint them.
So, not him personally.
No, him personally. We're giving him the color.
Don't do
He doesn't have to pick the color. We're gonna tell him, this is the color you're painting and get to work, James. So, get some overalls. So,
I did my greenhouse.
yeah, he's not doing anything on the weekends.
Would you be comfortable with staff trying to categorize what we've discussed here?
Yes.
And maybe start with we've got some project costs for some of these, apply construction inflationary numbers to come up with a range.
Yeah.
Plus or minus 10, 15%, whatever. So at least we can start to look at, because what I worry about is that 75 million goes really fast on some of these projects because of the cost of them. And so that we can then maybe start to have a little bit more of a discussion about prioritization of what we've talked about here.
Could we ask this? I would like to suggest if we can do it by tomorrow's meeting, take that list and, put your, what you think for you personally is your first priority, your second priority, and third priority, and I would like to give that to them and see where we overlap and start with that. That would be where we have common ground. Then you could put some numbers to that.
We won't have enough time to discuss it at a 1-hour session.
No, I'm just saying if we thought about it tonight,
Yeah, sure.
we can hand them a piece of paper
Right.
tomorrow and say, here, you go back and take
Exactly.
Homework.
take a look at that. We're not putting any numbers to it yet, but we're going to see, I'd be interested to see where we overlap.
Except for we've added additional property.
That's okay. You don't have to have those on your list. I have them on my list because I put them there. So can we do that by tomorrow? You can hand scratch it, or you can send it to them in an email or whatever. I'm going to tear off my sheet of paper and I'm going to give it to them. So let's commit to doing that tomorrow.
Okay, it's fine by me, but I'm retired. Some of these people are working during the day, I believe.
Some may still have city commission homework tonight.
I would prefer,
We're not going to be discussing it at tomorrow's meeting. We're just going to give you our list.
I would prefer, I think the list is a good idea. I think one day's time is not enough to think about it.
Agreed.
How long have you guys had the packet?
Well, I've been thinking about it, and in our discussion here, I've already altered it.
I have too, but I mean, I got mine today, and I sat down, I read it all, and I looked at it, and I said, okay.
I would say,
The question is not how long we've had the packet. The question is how long we've had the idea in our head that we wanted to rank these for you by tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm trying to be respectful
I'm
of,
giving you a little challenge.
I do.
We're all saying no.
I'm gonna-
We're all saying
I'm
no.
going to make a motion that we do not. do
She
it
can't make us do it.
tomorrow.
This is a work session, we are not voting on anything.
Okay, fine. I say no, but I think to get it in a specific time frame where we have some time to think about it instead of 24 hours.
Everybody has said no.
agreed.
No,
We're done.
no, we can say let's have an urban renewal,
Mr. Conkle, you have permission to go home to your family.
do it a week from tomorrow or something like that and send it to SNAP, not tomorrow.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, are we done?
I think, yeah, I feel like we didn't have anything else that we wanted to necessarily get through tonight. So I think we're at a good spot where people can kind of, the commission can kind of go back and digest this. There may be other things that come up. People may talk to you, right? I mean,
People may talk to us?
well, I mean, once this gets out that we're talking about project lists, right? You know that there's going to be
I
questions
think,
coming.
you want to put together, to do that kind of listing and categorization. I think it would be a good idea for us to make our submissions first to see where we're all coming from before you do that.
That's what I think, that's why I said.
But not by tomorrow.
All right, not by tomorrow, I'm just trying to challenge, get some discussion going here, see, I got everybody talking, was my goal. I threw something out there and you guys,
You're welcome.
thank you.
Oh, my God.
It was not
I
meant
think-
to offend.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm not exactly clear.
Well, he suggested a week.
Hey, we're going to start working now.
So by the time we have our next commission meeting, which is a week from tomorrow,
Well, we're not.
So the tiers,
but you can turn it in, you've already got yours done.
I know, I did it.
so just to be clear,
tomorrow-
the tiers and categories that staff are working on are because the properties themselves can be classified
Yeah.
or kind of binned according to, complexity, ones that would take much larger investments potentially. And we could still have prioritization even within those three categories or whatever the prioritization is definitely going to come, but I think understanding the properties and doing the work on potential costs and kind of seeing how they lay out would be helpful.
I think it's going to be eye-opening,
Yeah.
right? Because there's going to be two ways, right? It's going to be this project is going to cost a certain amount of money, or it could be, we have a hard cap at 130.1 million, we're only going to invest up to this amount, regardless of if it's in year 1 or year 8, regardless of inflation costs, right? We're only going to invest X. I mean, so there's going to be some shifting in here, which is why I'm hoping to leave a little bit of flexibility, because, even on some of the private side development, we're going to have to make estimates to try to determine how much increment's going to come in to be able to do some of those later projects once we expend our $3 million capacity, right? We're going to have to come up with a formula or a guesstimate on what that looks like in year, project gets taken down in year 3, comes on the tax rolls in year 5, 6, then you got that increment coming in, because that is going to drastically impact, right? Because at 35 million, you got 3 projects probably, right?
The only reason I was suggesting if we're going to get listed into you, to wait on that, because we're suggesting new areas as well. And it might be better for us to get those lists to you.
Sure.
And if you see 3 or 4 people are suggesting some of the same new things, then it gives you the opportunity to do that, include them in the categorization. So I don't have any problem with getting our ideas to you a week from today, but I wouldn't do the categorization until you have those lists.
Yeah, I mean, if you're
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're flexible on either way. I think we're going to end up having multiple discussions about this once we start to refine the project list and the costs.
I don't know if some of you've been involved in different planning exercises, and I don't mean planning, land use planning, but planning exercises. We had one about 10 years ago that I was involved in where we had to, just right off the top of our head, we had to put things in different categories. We were able to change our mind later, but sometimes if you overthink something, you don't want to overthink it all the time. I mean, so that was the only reason I threw that out, is that yes, we want to think about it, but sometimes you just need to say, okay, boom, 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 see it in print, and then you go, okay, well, I want to move this here now, and I want to move that there. Go ahead. You're smirking.
Yes, forgive me for this, but this sounds like a dot thing.
No, I don't like dots. Remember, you and I are firmly against dots.
So I guess my point is, I want to have the categories, I want to have staff come back to us with that. And I don't like the list thing necessarily, because it's just going to be a tally mark of who had 3 things on their list and whatever, which to me is a dot exercise about who likes this and whatever. I want to have that conversation, because to me, there's variables here where I'm not convinced that the Amtrak station is done. I think that not being on the list is a huge mistake. And I want to be able to talk about those kind of things. And I think without a dialogue with us, I don't mind us jotting down a list, but I think that needs to be done in a way that we can have a conversation about it as it relates to those categories, so that we're all kind of hearing that.
Amtrak station.
But we're putting forward a list of individually.
Right.
The only dots we're putting on is things of categories we've identified. And it might not correspond to anything you're doing.
If Tony brings dots in here, then we can completely rebel and just run screaming out of the room. Don't bring any dots in.
So, I guess I will leave it up to each of the individual commissioners what they would like to submit to us. We're going to start creating the categories and trying to put some cost guesstimates around these. We have Restore Cap, we have election of the Renewal Commission Chair and Restore Cap tomorrow. On the 20th, we have Summit Development coming to present. That's going to take the whole hour. So I'm thinking another off-commission date. Otherwise, we're into May at the earliest, depending on what happens on the 20th.
And let me remind us that those of us that participated in the exercise with the Tumwata students, wanted them to come and do a presentation of the top 2. We were supposed to send some votes in to say which one we thought were the best projects. And I think that we should get an opportunity to hear their proposal before an urban renewal meeting, sometime before school lets out this year, because we don't know where those students are going. And I'd like us to close the circle on that, because there were 2 big articles in the Tribune about it, in the Oregon City News, and I think that this would be really a good thing to sort of closed the loop. We were there, we did some those of us that attended were evaluation, and you could kind of hear what their thoughts were. So if we could get that arranged, it doesn't matter who's the chair, but I just think that would be great for them to do that. And it could take, because I know they was going to get down to 2 projects, so it would only be 2 groups of students. And if the other students want to come, great, you know, they can see how their government works, you know? Does anybody object to that? So let's get them in here.
Of course, it's my ignorance, but I don't remember the Urban Renewal Commission being advised that this activity was going on.
We weren't. I didn't even know it was happening until I saw it in the paper,
That's a
so.
complete surprise to me.
Well, I don't know who was the inviter, but it was, several of us were invited to come. And we were, go ahead.
Well, I think it was only you, because I only knew because you texted me the day of. And I was free at that time, so I didn't even hear about it
I
until the
wasn't
day
aware
of.
of it either.
Then your name and chair of the Urban Renewal Commission comes right in the newspaper, and I'm saying, what?
Yeah. So the rest of us were kind of out of the loop of that.
invitation. I just assumed that they invited the entire commission.
Well, we're telling you they didn't.
But
So you weren't doing an end run around us?
no,
Okay,
I wasn't
good.
the inviter. The teacher was the one that invited people. And he sent it to the city address. So, you know, he didn't know that I was on the Urban Renewal Commission. He knew that I was a city commissioner. So I just assumed everybody, you know, and I said, oh, aren't you coming? And I was talking to him and he goes, I don't know anything about it.
Okay, so we will, would
What
another,
is that smirk?
would another non-commission night meeting to walk through these project lists together?
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay, so we will circulate another couple dates to see if we can find one that works for everybody.
I would just say if you're talking about a Tuesday, the second Tuesday is out for me.
That's out for, yeah, it's our work session night, so hopefully we're out too. Yeah.
You have Greater Watershed. Yep.
Yep.
We have a work session. All right, is there any other exciting business to come before the Urban Renewal Commission before we lose our colleague on the end and the other one on the end?
Oh, I got an announcement to make, but it can't be here.
Okay, then.
So you close the meeting, then I can make it.
Okay, being that there's no further business, I will close the retreat. Thank you.